chillin', serial killin', pre-core villains on the mic, got you reeling. 5-star rated from the floor to the ceiling. If you catch a 1-star, no time for feelings. Got a demon DJ on the ones and twos, by the name Beelzebub, so don't get confused. So grab a seat by the fire, roast them all over two, and prepare to hear the legend of the Straight Chillin' Crew.
What up, international nerds? Welcome to another soju-fueled episode of Straight Chillin', the weekly horror movie review show where you chill and we kill, slice, dice, and chop up yet another horror movie. My name is Bob, and I'll be your host for the evening. This is episode 476, recorded Sunday, May 12th, 2024. Tonight we're talking about the winner of the May poll, which was Memories of a Murder. Before we get into it, let me introduce everyone else on the show. First up, calling in from Washington, D.C., we got your boy Randeezy. What's up, man?
Nice, good idea.
What's going on, buddy? Good to talk to you. What's that flavor of soju you're handling over there?
I'm handling the plum flavor. It's
all right.
delicious.
Roll.
Yeah, what do you got?
I got the lychee, which I am discovering as I take my first sips. I don't care for very much. So, oh well.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Pour it out and go grab another one.
Yeah. It's like only like $9 here or some shit, as opposed to
$9.
overseas. Well, speaking of soju.
Damn. Yeah, speaking of soju. Last but not least, calling in from Seoul, South Korea, we got your boy Soju. What's up?
Oh, annyeonghaseyo, everyone. It's your boy Soju, the one guy without soju.
Yeah. I'm gonna say this: we stand a much better chance of having soju stains than you do right now. So
I know, damn. I'm
not really living up
disappointed.
to the title.
It is 8 a.m. and I do have class in a couple hours, so unfortunately, I will not be partaking.
Getting shit hammered before your
Yeah,
class.
before my class. Yeah.
I'm drunk
That's-
on
that's the-
myself.
Woo.
They really just beat the American right out of you, didn't they? I'm
Well,
on shot
cheers,
3, but
boys.
Class 1.
Enjoy your soju in both senses today.
Oh, yeah.
All the senses.
Always.
Treating
Senses
ourselves
working
right.
overtime.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Bob,
see,
you
we're
look
talking-
naked over there, though. For behind the scenes, Bob's blues
true.
are gone. They're stripped down, and we're gonna get the
Oh my
reveal
God.
of Bob's blue boxes later. I don't know at what
Oh
point.
my
but
god.
I don't
Oh my
know either when that's
We'll
when
find
Randy
some time to work it
decides to
in.
hit the fucking bump,
I mean,
it'll just
we're
happen.
now currently speaking about it.
So,
We got to build
well, Randy, hit
anticipation.
it. Fuck it, hit it.
What?
The bump, hit it.
Hit, the bump? The bump?
Nice and
The fuck are you talking
smooth.
about?
The blue bump. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
Oh, okay.
Bob go wrong, worrying his friends, sifting way too long through those Blu-ray bins, and it gets worse. He'll have no jet ski, wasting all his dough on those DVDs.
I just had like a full-scale panic moment where I thought that you sent me a bump that I never saw. Or I was like,
Nah,
I don't have a new bump. Sorry.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
No, we were talking last episode. I'm moving, packing up all my movies, and the boys here were trying to guess how many boxes it would take to hold all of my movies.
Mhm.
And Randy, you came in at 10, I believe, and Juice, you were a solid dozen.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
So
We
I
had
got
some
a box.
participants
Where we at?
on Slack. I can't remember. I don't have the numbers in
True.
front of me, but
Yeah.
I think there
I
was,
think there was a
10
10 or a
69 in there.
oh
I
yeah,
think
that's
it's
That's
good.
possible.
reasonable. Yeah.
69 dudes.
Seems
That's a
quite
lot.
possible.
It's a lot of boxes.
That's a whole lot of boxes.
That's a blue house.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, I think of everybody that guessed, actually, Juice, you were the closest.
Oh,
Oh,
boy. The closest.
Congratulations. Yeah.
How
well-
many blues, Bob?
Oh boy.
The number of blue boxes was a baker's dozen.
Oh, did I hit?
Baker's
Oh,
does.
13.
The
Okay.
baker's dozen.
Come on. It's the metric dozen.
Oh my lord. On the metric. Wow, Bob.
Actually,
How do you feel about that? Proud.
Pretty good, actually. I was worried it was gonna be a lot more.
Oh, really?
I feel
A lot
pretty
more than
good.
13 boxes.
Rob's like, oh my god, I'm gonna be the emperor.
I
with
don't
no
have
clothes.
enough
Oh, shit.
blues.
I
Oh,
really
God.
gotta step up my game here, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I would also like to note that Bob did say the boxes were slightly larger than average, so he's proud of those low
Oh,
numbers.
I see. Someone didn't settle for the liquor boxes.
Well,
like
all
full
right.
scale.
These
I'll be
boxes
waiting.
are 4 by 3 by 3 feet.
I'll be
All right.
waiting for my prize in the mail. I'm happy to get so close. I don't know if anybody on Slack guessed 13 or not. Maybe.
I don't think anybody not that I can recall, anyways. So yeah, your prize, Juice, is actually going to be 13 boxes of Blu-rays.
Oh
your way.
yeah, I'm inheriting it.
Well,
Well, no,
you're
Bob, that's
welcome.
okay. Now it's on record that if something happens to Bob, I get the blues. I get them to do whatever I want with.
Yeah.
Legally, Justin technically owns the whole collection at this point.
At this point, they're mine.
Yes.
That's Korean law.
Yeah.
Right there. That's how it works. All right, boys, before we get into it, we do have a little bit of housekeeping. Let's tackle that real quick here. So our June poll is currently posted over on our Patreon website. If you support us at the $5 level or above, you get a chance to vote on a movie we're talking about this June. Randeezy, this is your takeover month. What's going on? What's happening?
So this month I decided to just dig into something kind of fun, something interesting, and to me that immediately brings up cryptids, the creatures of myth or legend, or maybe not,
Fact.
that haunt
You did
various
yeah.
sectors of this world.
You did a whole cryptid Inktober. Was it last year or
I
2 years
did,
ago?
yeah, that
Or
was
9
2
years ago. Who
now.
knows?
Yeah, like years.
Whatever.
The fuck is that? That's a minute, right? No, yeah, I did a whole 31 days of cryptids a couple years ago, and this is just kind of bringing that flavor back around for me. So yeah, there's 3 cryptid films to choose from. One is Willow Creek, Bobcat Goldthwait directed film. There's Mothman Prophecy, and then there is The Last Broadcast. I suppose we should get Justin to ask about the numbers, huh?
Well-
Justin, ask Rob about those numbers.
Bob, how those numbers looking?
Randy, ask Justin to ask me about the numbers, please.
Randy, could you please ask me to ask Bob to ask me to ask you to ask me? What,
Rob,
Bob, what
ask
are the
me
numbers?
what the numbers are.
Oh God, the numbers. Okay, here are the numbers. Mothman Prophecy is 54%, still in first place.
Ooh.
Second place, we got Willow Creek coming in with 25%. Finally, The Last Broadcast with 21%.
Not bad though. Not a bad
Yeah.
split there.
It is. It's an equitible.
Especially
everybody
after
showing up. You know?
Memories of Murder just stomped on for like a whole month. That's a nice, you know, it's got some
Yeah.
shots over there.
My dong was stomped for a whole month.
Well, mine's
Well-
fine. Just
Are you
for
waiting
the
to receive my limp penis?
just for the record, mine's doing great.
Very virile.
Just took it for a walk. It was fantastic.
It had a
I just
wild
spilled my soju.
weekend.
God damn.
Did you? Oh, Randy.
He spilled his soda.
Party foul.
I've got soju stains all over my desk now.
It's gonna be one of those episodes.
He literally has soju stains. Finally, it only took 476 shows.
Oh my god.
Right.
I know. Get your
Don't
votes
say
in.
those numbers to me.
Get your votes in for the end of the month. We'll see what we're talking about this June. In other Patreon news, we're dropping mini-casts every other Friday. This past Friday, we just dropped a Q&A that we recorded while at the Overlook Film Festival by your boy Mike Flanagan. It's the 10th anniversary screening of Oculus. Phil Noble Jr. from Fangoria was there, fielding some questions, and it was a great time. We recorded all that for you. You can check it out on our Patreon website or on your Patreon feed, anywhere you get your podcasts, really. So check that out if that sounds of interest to you. And that's really all we got going on over at Patreon currently. Boys, do you have anything you need to plug?
Go ahead.
I was just saying I do not. So
Oh, okay.
whatever you're going to.
I'll just go ahead. I plugged it last week, but since it's sandwiched, I always like to give a double dip. But I was featured on an episode of a podcast called Don't Believe the Hype, which is specifically going through the Arctic Monkeys catalog song by song in chronological order. And they're now in their third series, which is the third album called Humbug. I was on an episode called Frightline Dining Room, which is a B-side to that album. So if you're interested in hearing me talk about a Arctic Monkey song for almost 3 hours, then
God
Man.
damn.
head on over to Don't Believe
Sounds
the
like
Hype.
you guys got trapped in the nettles a little
Oh,
bit.
dude, close. Yeah, close segment too there. It's similar song, but yeah, it was a fun discussion. Always enjoy talking Arctic Monkeys, and I really enjoy that podcast. So yeah, check that out.
Check it out. Cool. I think our house is clean.
This house is clean.
All right, let's get into the main event. We're talking Memories of Murder, and we are kicking it off with the back of the box.
What's on the back of the box?
Bob.
Wow. Unfortunately, we couldn't tell whether you actually had this box or not. So I'm curious.
I do have it, but my box is in a box.
Sure,
right
it's
now,
in a box.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Is it that Criterion?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Look
One
at
of
you with your knowledge.
Whoa.
Wow.
I know.
You're a real good consumer. You know that?
Know about discs. Wow.
I am not.
You-
So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, Criterion put it out on Blu-ray. You can get it pretty easily. Check it out.
Okay. Cool.
Do it.
Got some
So we're
good
talking-
features on there, Bob.
Probably. I don't know. It's in a
God.
box. Like I said,
It's in a box.
it's in a box.
All right.
Memories of Murder from 2003. Not rated apparently, with a runtime of 2 hours and 12 minutes. This was written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, and it stars Song Kang-ho, Kim Sang-kyung, Kim Ro-ha, and some other lovely Korean names. Plot synopsis brought to you by IMDb is as follows. In a small Korean province in 1986, two detectives struggle with the case of multiple young women being found raped and murdered by an unknown culprit. Gentlemen, have we seen Memories of Murder before, and would you recommend folks check it out? Randeezy, kick us off.
Actually, yes. And as a matter of fact, I saw it on the very disc that is now packed away at your place. I don't know, a couple years ago, maybe when I was visiting. Yeah, I'd seen it then. It was post Parasite, but not much. I think that was probably why I picked it off the shelf. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie. I think that it's like as far as Korean cinema goes, this is one that I feel like is accessible in a way that some aren't. And honestly, like it's especially a watcher, I think, if you're like down with the procedural stuff, the Fincher-esque sort of investigative thing. It's got a lot of that. It's got a lot of Fincher blood in this one, I think.
Right on.
So yes.
If you are down with the sickness, check it out.
Ah, yes.
Juice, what about you?
Yes, I had seen it before, but just recently. It might have been just last year, maybe 2 years ago. I'm probably talking about it on the show and what you've been watching. Or it's probably on my letterbox. I could check it. But yeah, so this was, I guess, my second watch, maybe third tops. But yeah, I would recommend people check this out. This is kind of this kind of reminds me, this is like the Korean Zodiac in a way, or that's just kind of what it reminds me of. And you know,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
even stuff like Seven and Fincher is very accurate. And yeah, I would recommend. This is like considered, you know, top tier Korean cinema, and Bong Joon-ho, of course, is, you know, one of the best Korean directors. So yeah, I would recommend people check this out. I think it is a lot more accessible than a lot of Korean cinema. To be honest, when we were gonna watch again, I was dreading a little bit because I was like, oh man, I gotta find 3 hours, and it wasn't. It was right around
No.
2. So I was like, I just had it in my mind that it was like close to 3 hours. I was like, oh my lord.
It's a key difference
but-
between this and Zodiac.
yes. Or just most Korean films. So yeah, so yeah, check it out. Bob, had you seen this before? Would you recommend people check it out?
Yeah, this is my second watch. I think first time sounds like I watched it was whenever
With
Randy was
Randy.
here. Yeah. And yeah, I do recommend checking it out for sure. It's yeah, if you're into like police procedural stuff like you guys were saying, I think this is kind of perfect. True crime kind of stuff. I think this would be perfect for you. Or if you just want to like just dip your toes into Korean horror, this would be like a good like gateway, I think.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely worth watching, just in general. So
But yeah.
solid recommendation across the board from you boys at Straight Chilling. We are going to spoil the shit out of this, and here comes your warning.
Spoiler warning.
Oh, Bob, did you type up a plot synopsis?
I did it. I did it again.
All right. Good luck
Oop.
with all these Korean names.
Oops, I did it. Dude, I know. I apologize in advance.
I will say,
Um,
throughout the episode, I will do my best as well, but a lot of these don't have Korean like letters attached, and going from Korean to English romanization is garbage. I hate the system that's used, and so I'll do my best as well. But yeah, we'll be all right.
Soju stains up on his
Yeah.
pulpit here.
The romanization is
The
bullshit.
romanization of Hangul is a travesty. We need
We need to eradicate this lingual issue.
We're gonna tear it down
Um,
and build it from the ground up. No, all right. Bob, go ahead.
Cool. All right. So yeah, here goes the plot. So the movie opens up in October 1986. Two women are found raped and murdered outside of a small Korean town. Detective Park Do-man isn't used to dealing with such extreme cases, which end up leading to subpar evidence collection in detective work. Park claims he can identify suspects by making eye contact with them, however. It's kind of a specialty of his. He interrogates a mentally handicapped boy named Bat Kwong Ho because he used to follow one of the victims around. It was just sort of known. Park's partner Cho ends up beating Bak and forces him to confess. So Tae-yoon, a detective from Seoul with more modern training, tries to assist in the investigation, but he and Park clash. So deduces Bak is not capable of committing these crimes. He also notices the murders happen on rainy nights, and the killer targets women wearing red specifically. Inspector Kwan also helps with the case and finds the same song is requested to be played by the local radio station each night a murder happens. Despite a stakeout on the very next rainy night, another woman is murdered. The detectives watch the crime scene the following day and arrest a man they find masturbating. His confession doesn't fit the details of the crime, but he does mention a man that has been known to emerge from a school's outhouse, which matches another story two local schoolgirls told So on the night of the most recent murder. So investigates, and he finds the killer's only surviving victim. She lives near the outhouse, and provides details that exclude the man they previously arrested from being the killer. They release the masturbator, and Park is very upset. The killer strikes yet again, and the investigation leads them to Hyun Gyu, who works at the gypsum factory and has been requesting the same song be played on the nights of the murders. He matches details they found, but they have no real hard evidence to convict. Listening back to Fox's forced confession, the detectives realize he must have seen one of the murders take place, given all of the finer details that he mentions. They go to the restaurant Bach's father owns and find a drunken Cho who has been suspended from the police for beating Hyung Yu. After being mocked, Cho starts a brawl. Bach hits him in the leg with a bit of a chair, and So and Park take off after him. But before they can talk to him, he stumbles onto some train tracks and gets hit by a train and dies. The coroner discovers semen in the most recent victim, so decides to send it off to America to be analyzed against Hyung Yu's. On the next rainy night, So watches Hyung Yu, but dozes off. There's another victim that turns out to be one of the schoolgirls he befriended earlier in the movie. The next day, an enraged So attacks Hyung Yu, and Park interrupts him with the DNA test results. They are inconclusive, but So tries to shoot Hyung Yu anyway. Park stops him, and Hyungyu is allowed to leave. Fast forward to 2003. The crimes remain unsolved, and Park is now a father and businessman. He passes by the first crime scene in a car and stops to talk to a young girl. She mentions that she previously spoke with another man in the exact same place who reminisced about something he had done there long ago. Park asks what the man looked like, and the girl replied he looked very ordinary. Shaken by his response, Park stares directly into the camera. Roll credits.
Interesting film, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean I feel like this is going to come up over and over again because it's where my mind is just like circling. But this feels so much like a Fincher investigatory outing. You know what I mean? Like even the color grading is kind of like stuck in a single palette, which is something that he did for a while. Less so now. He's a little bit more like, I don't know, varied now. But like it's almost, it's not quite like Saw levels of green, but there's a lot of green in this movie. You know. But so I don't know, there's like just a lot, I feel like a lot was pulling out of that. And you know, Fincher didn't invent the procedural like this necessarily, but like the tone just really hits me that way, and it seems like it does you, Justin, at least. Rob, do you see it?
Yeah, I get a lot of Fincher out of this, but I also think, which is somewhat typical to the Korean movies that I've seen anyways, it does incorporate a bit of humor. There's definitely levity in this, and some of like the ineptness of the cops. And like when they go sing karaoke, or whenever So first arrives in town, and Park like arrests him, thinking he's like a creeper or whatever. Like there's definitely some humor injected here. It's not quite as grim as like a Seven is. But yeah, I think it's got Fincher vibes just in general. Yeah,
That's a good call.
So one thing about this film too is that was definitely more impressive to me on this second watch, where I'm like hyper analyzing everything, is it's like dripping with cultural relevance, like Korean cultural things that are going on, and at the same time it's very accessible to, like we said, to an international audience. I think people are able to follow this kind of like neo-noir thing. I think there are ties to like films they're more familiar with that had come out like maybe late 90s and stuff, like Fincher stuff. But one thing that I really appreciate is just how much cultural relevance is going on here, and how much I appreciate it, because we have some friends over at Dark Side of Soul, and Sean's been on our podcast before, but their other partner, Joe, he just to kind of like give an idea too of like, he worked with Anthony Bourdain when he came to Korea for his thing, but they had to coordinate a lot with the Korean government and stuff like that. And I want to talk like a little bit more like later about like the history of like Korea and like why some things are like very relevant here. But just to give you like a little insight of like why I think this is so important, is at the time there were certain Korean dishes that are like really great and that people really enjoy, but the Korean government like didn't want them to cover that because they thought that it made like Korea look poor, or they thought it wasn't necessarily respectable. And there's been like a lot of like, over the years there's been a lot of like historical locations that have been like gentrified and stuff, because like they don't understand the idea of like dark tourism, or like, no, don't like give Korea this kind of like bad name, or like make it look in this certain way. And so for this movie to come out in 2003, which was like right with the big boom of like Korean cinema kind of exploding and everything like that, to have this movie about this infamous serial killing that never went solved, that is essentially about the corruption of police, the corruption of the government at the time, the ineptitude, how things like really were going on at that time, and to be a huge international hit is a big fucking deal, like a really big fucking deal. And so everything that they touch on in this is just like very impressive. And going back and visiting it now 20 years later and like seeing like how much of an impact it made is like really fucking impressive.
It's plum off.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really interesting. I would love to ask you more about like this, because I know that you did a little bit more research. Obviously, you're immersed in some knowledge.
I've got like
about
20 tabs open, so I'll do my best
Yeah,
to
I'm
cover
sure.
what we can.
But like the thing that I was interested in, and again, this is I'm gonna say Fincher's name like 1,000 times here because this is
Mhm.
like a really good jumping off point for me. This movie reminded me quite a lot, specifically of Mindhunter season 2, which is about the Atlanta murders. I forget what they're called, but like the ones in the 80s,
Yeah.
of young black men. And this is like what I like about that, and what I like about like what Fincher does, and what a lot of these noir, to your point earlier, like a lot of noir is like intrigue and like storytelling set against a backdrop of historical significance. And that's what's happening here, because there's some sort of uprising or rioting, something about the mayor, like mayor, I don't remember the mayor's name now, but um clearly like there's some sort of political unrest that is like being fought tooth and nail by the powers that be. What do you know about that? I'm very curious.
Okay, so yeah, so we can hop into that. So that is going on throughout the movie. And just to kind of give some historical context, so this took place in 1986, but I'm gonna specifically talk about one, but there's a history even before that. So in 1979, there was the president, which was really kind of a dictator. He was assassinated, and there was this military general that like took over and essentially like kept power and was essentially like a military dictator. His name was Chun Du-hwan, and he was in power from 1980 to 1988. So he is who is in power during this time. And one of like the biggest like travesties of Korea like took place under him in a place called Gwangju, but that was in 1980, where a bunch of like students mostly were like massacred and stuff like that. So that's still going on in this film. So what happened in this place, or in this film, they're talking about we need more policemen, and they're like, oh, they're off, quelling the Suwon riots or whatever. But that took place actually Halloween 1986. And just this little blurb: riot police moving under clouds of tear gas stormed 5 barricaded university buildings this morning and arrested hundreds of radical students who had occupied them since Tuesday. Essentially, like the students were fighting against this military oppression. And interestingly enough, which was backed by the United States. So there was like with certain generations, there's this kind of like, if you hear any kind of like negativity towards America, it's because they kind of propped up these military dictators for so long, under the guise of fighting communism in the North and stuff like that.
For shame.
So that's what's going on in this film. He actually voluntarily gave up power because in 1988 South Korea was selected to host the Olympics, and they did. There was an actual presidential election that was held at that time. One of his like supporters won and carried over a lot of his policies until about the mid 90s. So you still had a lot. So one of the reasons this is so big too is because all during that time, the 80s and like early 90s, there was this huge media oppression. Like there's no free press, no freedom to make movies about things like this. And so if you consider that this film came out in 2003, you're talking about a time period of less than 10 years where filmmakers were actually able to develop their skills, write freely, and feel the safety to be able to make a film like this, because otherwise you would have been like arrested or persecuted or not been allowed to do it at all. So within like 9 years, Bong Joon-ho essentially like was inspired to become a filmmaker and felt the freedom to write and make this movie about something that had happened just 20 years prior, which had occupied like the fear of a generation for like even into the 70s, because there was like military dictators. So yeah, that's essentially what's going on, is the university students are fighting against the oppressive government.
Yeah.
Which is
What an
why
unprecedented thing.
which is why the police the police being so corrupt, and their like the way that the police handle this situation is also very relevant and important, because as we see time and time again, they're just essentially torturing people to get false confessions, which actually did happen. So like in this real case, it went unsolved, but they did arrest somebody for it, and he sat in jail for more than 20 years and was just released, I think, a couple years ago due
What
to
the fuck?
DNA evidence. So there was a guy who was eventually arrested for this, probably tortured. I think he did say that he had a confession that was under the guise, got under the guise of torture. But that was like the regular thing back in the day. Like police corruption was terrible. They were locking up students, torturing them, getting confessions. Just like this movie shows.
Found a little more trivia regarding the killer, the real life killer.
Yeah.
So I didn't see anything about like them arresting somebody falsely, but much later on, after this movie came out, so September 18th, 2019, police announced that a man in his 50s called Lee Chun-jae had been identified as a subject in the killings. He was identified after DNA from the underwear of one of the victims was matched with his, and subsequent DNA testing linked him to 4 of the other unsolved serial murders. And at the time he was identified, he was already serving a life sentence in prison in Busan for the rape and murder of his sister.
Yeah.
Jesus
Who was also 18 years old at the time. So they're talking about how young some of these girls were. One of the last one is like a middle school, I think 13. Yeah. So even we say sister-in-law, but she was 18. He drugged, raped, and killed her as well. And then like try to get rid of the body in some way. Yeah.
What's his name?
Lee
Like, he's not
Chun-jae.
represented in this film, right?
He is not, but it's
No.
weird. If
Okay.
now this was my opinion, this might not be, but if you look at his picture of him, I think like the one they have on Wikipedia is him as a high school graduate, I think. So he's around 20 years old. And I think it's so creepy. I think he actually kind of like the figure, like slim, soft looking kind of guy, smaller frame. I think he actually looks like the last suspect that they pull in this film, which was super creepy to me. The spelling, if you want to look it up, Brandon, it's Lee for last name for Wikipedia, and then Choonjae, Lee Chun-jae.
Yeah, I'm looking at him now. He bears a resemblance.
Just so you know, just like the kind of shape, smaller kind of guy, softer features, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But
Something
That's a
else-
lot of context to add on top of this. Go ahead, Bob.
Something else I found, apparently 4 other suspects supposedly committed suicide after being falsely accused and tortured by the police over the course of the investigation.
mhm.
And then in December 2019, 8 of the original investigators were arrested and charged with various crimes related to abuse of power, assaulting suspects, falsifying evidence, illegal detention, things of that nature. So I guess some of them did get their comeuppance for abusing their powers, but it does sound like maybe a little bit too late if people are
Yeah.
serving decades in jail and committing suicide over.
Well, that's why
this.
there's so much in this film that like really can like easily pass you by, and it's not necessarily important to know to be able to enjoy this film. But I mean, we do get
Yeah.
a little bit of that even with the third suspect, where people know that he's been arrested, and even though we see elements of the people on the side of like, they say people know, even the kids know that you're torturing innocent men down here and stuff like that. But the third suspect, who ultimately is deemed innocent, kind of, we see him eating in a restaurant or drinking in a bar or something like that, and like 2 women walk by, see his face, and quickly scurry away, like we gotta
what
get the
was
fuck
that?
out of here. Well, I mean, that's the stigma around it of, being accused, being suspected.
Okay, so it was
It's
because
a
he was
small
accused.
town.
yeah,
like,
yeah,
everybody
I
seems to
yeah, that
know.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
yeah.
What I wasn't sure if it was that or like I don't know. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah,
that
it's
was
the
dynamic there, or it was just that
reputation,
he's
yeah.
like an outsider to begin with. is
No,
kinda what I
no,
thought could be
it's like
case.
so going to Bob's point of like people being accused, and even though
Mhm.
you kind of work under the assumption of like, oh, the police are corrupt, but it still comes down to that: why were you suspected? Why
Yeah.
do they pull you in? What are your ties
yeah.
to it? And then
It
just
is-
carrying that around. Yeah.
It is interesting in this movie how like everybody definitely knows the police are corrupt and like torture people, and they're not very good at their jobs. They're breaking the law regularly, but at the same time they like wouldn't think twice about thinking like, oh, that guy is suspected of awful things. But also, like, I guess yeah, at the same time, you don't fucking know. Like, you're just trying to save your own
Right.
skin at the end of the day.
Well,
If
it's
you are a
like-
young
yeah.
girl in a town plagued by fucking sexual murders by a serial
Yeah.
killer, you're gonna stay clear of anybody who even
Yeah.
looks at you weird. Like,
And
Well, I mean, it's the
like-
idea too of I could say like, it's like if I was in the United States and I could say like I know there is a police corruption problem. They kill people and they get away with it and no problem. However, if somebody breaks into my house, I probably will still quickly call 911
yeah.
because
with the knowledge that something could go wrong and they could accidentally shoot me or you know what I'm
It's
saying.
like,
But it's still that idea of like we have a terrible system, but it's the only system that we have. We
yeah.
have to use like so yeah.
What else are you gonna do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
I'll
in
tell
this
you
movie.
a story.
Brandy, do you have something involving this? I was gonna sort of pivot to another point.
Yeah, let's pivot in a second. Like, I just wanted to say, there's a small story that I can tell you to this end, where like one of the few times I've actually had to call the police, somebody on my residential fucking suburban street, living with my parents, like early college, somebody had sideswiped my car and like knocked off the
mirror,
the rearview mirror and things like that. Nothing too crazy, but like, they fucked it up a little bit. So we called the police just to like get a report on and get to my insurance rolling and all that stuff. And the lady that came out started very plainly like accusing me of doing it myself. And she's like, I think someone's playing here, that sort of thing. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. It was very fucked up. And then a second cop showed up and he was like, oh, she's crazy. Don't worry about that. But like, that worked out fine. But like, if it had been just somebody who's like, oh, okay, if you say so, I'm not going to rock the boat. Then it's like, I could have been fucked. Like, I could have been on the hook for insurance fraud because somebody decided that on their own. And that's, I don't know. Just to say, like, there's a lot of corruption going around. And like in this movie, like, it just speaks to me so much watching them do all of this shit just by like, it's very clear. It's very, very like true crime feeling where like you see all these true crime documentaries and what so many of them have in common is the police doggedly hunting a person that they just in their gut know is the guy and then being proven fucking wrong over and over and over again. And that's what happens in this movie. Anyway, sorry, let's pivot.
I was sort of related to the cop still in this movie, though. I really thought it was funny and also kind of badass how, even though the cops are like very, pro beating the shit out of probably innocent people, the citizens in this town, like whenever Joe like starts laying into them, they whoop the ever loving shit out of them, and they chase after the other guys too. Like, they're not just laying down and taking it, which I thought was really badass.
Well, that was a great scene because what they're showing on the news is the protests, and even so, if you know the context now, the guy who's like always going off the handle, the kind of like lower rank sergeant who's always just kicking, he jumps in and kicks people all the fucking time.
Yeah.
He grabs one of the girls and is like holding her hair. She's a student and he's saying things like, oh, did you fuck your professor or whatever? He's like throwing out these like crude accusations. And like, it is that boiling point of like, people are rioting. They're taking over buildings. They're taking over government buildings. And this is a small town. They're like, yeah, we're going to beat your fucking ass. Like, you're whooping on this girl. And actually, I mean, this is the thing I was talking about in the 80s. It's horrific. There were like military guys coming in and literally like cutting women's shirts off, like cutting their breasts, like killing students, like young people. That is in the 80s. That was like, I mean, this was a boiling point, and that was 6 years prior to what's happening in this film. So yeah, they're like, to talk about the relevance of that, the cops are tired of it because they're being like accused or they're being blamed, and they're the government and the things like that, and like the students are like cheering it on, like, yeah, they're regular common people, and he's drunk already, and so he fucking throws a fit, and yeah, they whoop his ass.
Yeah, they beat the shit out of him.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
And that is a great scene. Yeah.
I love that scene. Cho is like such a piece of shit, and all the cops
Sucks
are doing
so
terrible
bad.
things, but like he especially. I don't know if it's like funny to me or if it's supposed to be funny when
Uh-huh.
he just like flies in and kicks the shit out
Dude,
of
I was
people
gonna say
over and
you can't give him
over.
any shade for his drop kicks because that motherfucker
He's
goes
got a strong leg.
whole
Yeah.
ass into people.
Well, I think
Like both legs, falls on the ground. It's like fucking pro wrestling moves. It's great.
Well, I think I really like watching it on a second time. I really think almost like everything is so intentional, and it's impressive that I mean, Bong Joon-ho had a film come out before this that was technically like an indie film. I haven't seen it. I saw it described as like a cursed masterpiece. So I think it just suffers from like some indie things. But this is essentially like his first his first like big movie that came out, and like everything seems so intentional. I think it's very there's actually some kind of subtle joke that is like tied to Korea and like this character, but they're talking about their education, and education is like really important in Korea. And even back then it showed like you know, money and stuff like that to go to university. So, you know, our first guy, he's like, "Oh, you got an associate's degree." And he's like, "Oh, why don't you go talk to Mr. 4-year degree over there, who's the guy from Seoul?" And then the guy who's always drop kicking people, he makes this joke, which you wouldn't really know, but he's like, "Well, I spent 4 years in high school," which is funny because in Korea, there's only 3 years of high school. So it's like he's fucking stupid or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's one of those like jokes you wouldn't really, but the fact that so he's the muscle, he's like this oppressive, you have these like different characters. So he's the muscle, he's the one who just goes in and absolutely tortures everyone. You have this guy who specifically says, "I have the shaman eye." So he like is, we've talked about this a little bit before with the whaling and stuff. This I and we see it going to the fortune teller and stuff. This traditionalism is still very much prevalent in Korea today, but definitely back then, especially in this small town, you know, they're like, "Go to the fortune teller." And he's like, "I got the shaman's eyes. I can read people and tell people." And then you have this guy from Seoul who's like, "Oh, I'm all about the investigation and the science of it," or something like that. But they're all fucking fucked, you know, in their own ways. But the fact that this guy gets his leg taken off, I mean, that is definitely relevant to what eventually happens with the police, because with like the police now, they were so bad that Korea like kind of swung and like corrected in a sense where like now the police are seen as kind of like completely toothless. Like 20 years later, 2003, they did a hard swing against corruption, which is great, you know, to say like, absolutely, you're not gonna be torturing people and but all these things. But now it's like your neighbor's like hitting his wife. I mean, I guess you can call the police, but like, are they really going to be able to do anything? Probably not. Like, they're kind of seen as like toothless. So, like, him to get the dude who was always coming in and drop kicking people, getting his leg removed is definitely relevant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought that
a
was
lot of
a
context.
funny. I thought that was a funny ass joke, regardless. Even not knowing there's only like 3 years of high school in Korea, like as if 4 years of high school was
Yeah.
just equivalent to 4 years of college.
Same.
That I really like. There's a lot of humor in this, and like even obviously some of it I missed, but like when they go to that karaoke joint and they're singing and having a good time or whatever, and they all sit down and like the boss, the chief or whatever is like shit hammered. And the guys start going at it. He has to like kind of break them up. Like in that scene, Cho is talking about how like American detectives, like their heads are spinning like tops because we have so much land and there's so much to investigate. And he's like, "Well, in Korea, we don't use our heads; we use our legs to investigate because Korea is the size of my cock, basically." And it's like it's such a ridiculous conversation.
That
man.
is
I
actually
love that scene.
like that's just in reference to losing the leg, that also holds some extra relevance. That's
It
interesting.
does, yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, that's really fucking interesting. I thought that whole scene was like very like this movie does a great job of like being accessible in that way where like everybody's like the expository language makes sense in context, but it also is like very valuable to me as an outsider who
Mhm.
doesn't really like know how this process works there. And I'm saying, okay, so this is how it works there. Is like, yeah, they're torturing people because they can get away with it, basically, and like they're doing whatever they got, like all this stuff. Like they think that investigating, it's like it reminded me of The Wire for a minute, like where it's like this is like
Yeah.
anything you can get away with is legal, basically, because you are the police and whatever you know you try and make the best case possible or whatever in America, but like here, there's not even that concern. It's just about collaring somebody, and that's kind of an underlying desire for a lot of police anyway. And there's a lot of obviously that's what leads to corruption. So like the fact that these guys are in charge of this, like the biggest serial killer case of
in
the
all
age,
of Korea, yeah.
and they just like not he's like just bad mouthing like this college graduate who came here and like I don't know, like just fighting amongst themselves and saying like, no, I can look in their eyes and I can just tell. It's just like bravado bullshit that like fucks over so many people in police interactions overall, like worldwide. Like I don't know.
I
I'm
like
really
it
into like how that's like a universal like fucked up language that we can share.
at the very end where they're having a brawl on the train tracks, and he runs in with like the DNA test result, and they're inconclusive. They like the super high tech mumbo jumbo doesn't help them at the end of the day. And then Park like stares into the dude's eyes one more time to like try and read him, and he's like, "I got nothing. I just don't fucking know." So like, no matter what, like either way you go about it, like your gut feeling or the science, or they just don't fucking know, so they have to let him go. And it's like so, it's like I don't know, like you really feel for him, even though they're like beating the shit out of innocent people throughout this whole movie. You still like kind of feel for him because that dude could go murder somebody else, maybe.
Well, that's the thing too, is like I like how it's structured in this way, because even Tae-yoon, who's the guy from Seoul, so he's at first, because by comparison, he seems definitely like the most competent, or he's like the one where you kind of are like, okay, this other guy, he's a dumbass.
He's not torturing.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we have 3 suspects in this film, and I think it's important that they show 3 suspects, because I think they directly reflect these 3 different detectives that we get. And so Tae-yoon is the last one, and I sent you guys a link, I don't know if you watched it, of Del Toro kind of like breaking down this film, that because he loves it.
Yeah.
And I think it was for the Criterion Collection. But he's the intellectual. He's from Seoul, and of course the guy he has is not this gruff everyday man, which is the second one, which is more tied to the associate's degree guy or whatever. He's tied to this guy, and that's where he breaks. It's like he sees himself. He's like trying to catch himself. It's the intellectual, it's the aloof, it's the cool guy, whatever, and that's what breaks him, because he knows in his heart, it's almost like, if it were me, I know it would be me in that capacity. Like, I know how you think, and I know how you did it,
Interesting.
and you're smart, and you called in, and you get, and that's what breaks him. That's where he starts to torture somebody and break the rules, and it drives him fucking insane. And in the same way of like the second one, I mean, we see them torture everybody. And I think they maybe could have made that a little bit clear. But the second suspect is just this everyday man. Like, he's got some fucked up kinks and stuff like that, but he's from this small town. And he's trying to work to support his wife and kids. He's living in this little cramped apartment. And it's very much in the similar apartment that we see the detective live in with like his girlfriend, like it's not like, I think each suspect is a reflection of the 3 detectives.
That's interesting that you say that. And like, I thought you were kind of going to go a little bit more into like thinking about them, like they are paralleled by the person that they are convinced as the killer. But like, it's also like, to me, like just about like choosing that person, the person that makes sense to you, like the person that makes sense to the intellectual. And here's the thing, is the person that makes sense to the intellectual among them is the guy that I think the movie is positioning as, this is probably the guy. Like, I think that the like, it doesn't say anything outright because ambiguity is part of the ending. We don't know, like, in reality, and they don't try and make it so, but they kind of like make a pretty strong overture towards, yeah, this is probably the guy. And it's really frustrating that you can't get this guy because you just don't have the evidence or whatever. And that's the stymieing of the police in a way that is like just circumstantially awful, but like has to be the way it is. So I don't know, like I like that each one of the, like, that they all kind of like center around these three different guys, and they are paralleled or whatever, but they also like, I don't know, like it's once they like they all have the same fault, which is once they're determined and decided on who they think it is, they are willing to bend the rules no matter which way that they want in order to collar the individual. So
Yeah.
he's just as susceptible. Even Detective Park says, "Man, you've changed." Like he
Mhm.
starts saying, "I want to beat the fuck out of this guy." He's like, "Oh, you've
Mhm.
really changed. Like I remember you giving me like bad looks about us doing that to the other guys."
Mhm.
He's like, "Well, don't do it. You'll be disgraced and all that stuff." And like, but of course they do. Like they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
They all do. I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, just for clarification, real quick, Juice. I think that Park, the woman that Park is seeing is a prostitute. I don't think that's his girlfriend. Just on
No.
like
Oh, they're married in the end.
Yeah, in the end they're married.
oh,
So
in
it's
the
his
end-
girlfriend. No, she's a nurse. She's the one who's going and
That's
picking
what I
up.
was going to ask you too.
Well, there was like, unless I misread, there's like some context clues in their conversation where he says like, everybody in the town comes to see you now, and you make more money doing this than you did working as a nurse at the hospital or whatever. It seems like,
Oh,
I don't know, Red is a prostitute for me. But even when they're having sex,
So
it
honestly,
seemed like sort of transactional almost.
Maybe.
it could potentially be both. She definitely is treating people though, because even one of the
Yeah.
last scenes that we see where ultimately the middle school girl gets taken, where we see her on the road,
Yeah,
right
yeah.
before that, she's in a pharmacy, she's picking up supplies, she's having conversation
Right.
with the pharmacist, and it's like she is treating people, and like the shot that she gives him, she's giving him vitamins and stuff like that, because she's always saying like, you're not sleeping well, you're not sure. So in some, it could be, I honestly, I didn't like look into her or anything. It could be a potential of like, this is a small town, she does both.
Yeah, they don't say
Maybe.
it outright, but
Yeah,
like just
but
through their
ultimately they
conversation.
are married, and
Yeah.
she's consistently with him. So we could say his
Yeah.
girlfriend or not. Ultimately, it's his wife.
Yeah, at the end of the story, yeah.
Yeah.
that is interesting. I was curious about that character because it's like she is kind of at least in a very small way by giving like she kind of plants the idea of this disabled person or whatever his name is, Huang or something. Like I don't remember his name, but the disabled guy. Okay, yeah. So like she kind of plants that idea in his head that it could be this guy, and all these characters that they look to, they all have something about them that makes them very suspicious. In
Yeah.
fairness, like one guy was jerking off at the scene of the crime in panties. There's
Yeah.
that's definitely a reason to suspect that guy.
Yeah.
There's not
Was
so
that
much of a
illegal?
reason. To
I mean, come on.
and it doesn't have to be illegal to be suspicious. But I don't know, like this first kid or whatever, like it's just it's so brutal and so like I don't know, my spouse, you guys know, works with disabled people,
Mhm.
and one of the big concerns here is like a lot of them are young black men, like who are in their early 20s or so, but they have the faculties of a much younger person, or
Yeah.
and they don't have necessarily social sense or ability to communicate even necessarily. And so one of the big concerns they have is like, sometimes what like some of them might like just touch a stranger and like touch their
Yeah.
hair or touch their arm or whatever, and it, like if they're not like immediately clocked as being like, oh, that's a disabled person, like
Sure.
that's doing, then they might
They're seen as
go
a
to jail
huge
at
threat.
best.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like there's a lot of pretty awful things that can happen to somebody who doesn't, have necessarily the capability to understand what is appropriate behavior in public, especially if they, fit a certain demographic that is not,
Yeah.
is not looked favorably upon. And I kind of feel like there's some of that going on with this character,
Totally.
this disabled character for sure, who's just like, it's real easy to pin it on the guy that can't defend himself. But if they listen to him for like 1 second, like the last thing we see before he gets hit by the train is him basically saying like that the guy that he has eyewitnessed as the killer, and that he can like rescue the investigation. They're like, shut up, don't talk about that. And because he's saying like, oh, he burned me, or something like that. And it's like, just listen to what he's saying. Like it's
Yeah.
like be a little empathetic to this guy and you'll get exactly what you want. It's clear that he knows exactly who this is, and it's clear that he's afraid to speak for some reason, and he's telling you why.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like the incompetence runs really deep, and that goes all the way to our Mr. Intelligentsia, Mr. like Soul, who's there to save the day and is like spending so much of the movie being highfalutin, Mr. Science that can solve it all and is right all the time. No, you're not right all the time. You're too fucking invested in your theory to see what's in front of you. And I don't know. I'm kind of wheeling out here, but there's so much like about this investigation that parallels things that I'm recognize in our own culture that it's like it just hits very strong, I think.
Well, another aspect too that is very, so we were talking about the woman, like, is she a prostitute, is she not, or whatever, but like these women that are essentially pushed like behind the scenes. So we have this female detective who essentially is the one who like is the fucking most capable, and there's a couple scenes that hit like really hard this second time. I remember them being prevalent, but the one where they essentially like use her as bait and to try to catch this killer, and they go into this shed, and at first they're like, when the kids come in and they're talking about her, they're like, oh yeah, she's a detective, they're kind of like talking her up, and some of the language that they use is like kind of honorific or whatever, because these are like young kids, and so like, oh yeah, she's a detective, she's to be respected and stuff like that. And then in one of the, like, it's not the very next scene, but like one of the close following scenes, she's just reserved to serving them coffee, like and she's even mocked. And actually, this is something that Bong Joon-ho, I think this has been an article that I've been wanting to write, but I need to do a little bit more research. I know it exists in Parasite, so when I saw it this time, I was like, okay, I think he probably does this consistently. So the bump that you actually used, Randy, is like he's mocking her in English, and especially at this time, but also like he does this in Parasite too. English is sometimes seen as this like higher, you have to like obtain it. Sometimes that comes from money. Like, can you send your kids to a English kindergarten and stuff? A status thing, yeah. So we've already seen that he's got this like complex, like, oh, Mr. Associate degree or whatever and stuff like that, talking about going to a 4-year degree. But he specifically uses English to mock her. And like, as he does this in Parasite 2, where the rich people speak bad, broken English to kind of assert their kind of dominance over the poor people or whatever. So like this aspect of treating these women who are capable and who know a fucking lot more than the men around them is definitely, and the fact that all of these victims are women, and we see like for a lot of time from their point of view, that one scene where the woman's walking through the rain, the song is fucking playing, the dude's head pops up out of the grass, like that's also something that Bong Joon-ho handles like so well in this film. That's why I thought like literally everything feels so intentional and feels like such a potent stab at Korean society as it was, and Korean society as it is in 2003, and in some ways Korean society as it is in 2024. So it's like still such a very powerful movie, I think. But that's something we did like haven't really touched on, like just the female aspect and perspective of this, which of course I always bring to the
always every time.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you
to the conversation.
No, that's totally fair. Like I thought that too. Like it seems like all of the good ideas, not all of, but a lot of the good ideas that these men are having is in some way sourced back to a female figure of some kind, be it a victim or another officer or a girlfriend, and they take that information, that really good, valuable information, and they fucking destroy any hope of it being useful, like so thoroughly and so like insanely that I mean, that's true. I feel like there definitely is an undercurrent in this film at minimum where it's misogyny and masculinity or whatever, overtly masculine men or whatever who think that they know so much better than these women around them are just going to fuck it up so badly the minute that they get the taste in their mouth. They'll just go and fuck it up. So I don't know. I think that's, I don't know, I think that's got to be pretty intentional commentary. Because I think there is some of that in Parasite. I think you're right about that. There's definitely like some competency gaps between the female and male characters in that film as well.
The male officers are obviously like very not they fucking suck at their jobs. But something that was, I guess, kind of a reveal towards the end was whenever the officer from Seoul rolls in, he like immediately is not buying the confession from Bach. It's like it's very much pulled out of him
You watch
by
them plant the
Detective
evidence
Park.
themselves.
And so, like, he suggests that the whole thing was like rehearsed before they actually got the tape recorder out and recorded it. And Park is like, no, it wasn't, no, it wasn't. And then later on in the movie, they have this basically the same conversation. He's like, no, it wasn't rehearsed. I swear it wasn't rehearsed. And he's like, well, how do you know all those intimate details? They must have seen the murder happen. But wouldn't Park come to that conclusion on his own, like as he's saying these things that he's like, how would he know if he didn't actually tell him beat by beat what happened? Wouldn't he just like think, oh, he probably watched
the thing
it
is
happen? Like
that's the real that's the core issue, is that they are incapable of seeing anything other than the conclusion that they want to be true, that they already believe in. It's confirmation bias top to bottom. So he can't even fathom in the moment, as this guy's telling him details, that that he knows those details, not because he's the murderer, but maybe for some other reason, like he witnessed it and you can find the murderer this way. Instead, he's like, no, we got our guy. This is our guy. He knows the details. It's got to be this guy. And it's like you cannot see around your own personal biases. That's so central to so many of those true crime stories I talked about earlier. Like, you watch one of like 9 out of 10 true crime documentaries you could watch on Netflix today are going to involve some level of somebody seeing the evidence towards one person or a couple people or whatever, pursuing those people so doggedly that they completely ignore other valuable information, and eventually they hit a stone wall because it's not true. And then they're like, shit, we guess we should have like not thrown away that evidence, or not, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they own, like, and maybe you could say that chalk that up to like a resources issue, but I don't think so, man. Like, thoroughness is not necessarily a resources issue when it's like, oh, this guy knows key details. What are the possibilities of why he might know those details? That's what detecting is supposed to be. I don't know. I think it's fucking very good.
There's a lot of like really good like sequences in this movie. The chase scene I thought was really fantastic. Really, really good tension built in that scene. When the dude Park sees like the red panties, because the guy's like pretending that he's a worker or whatever, he sees the red panties, walks over to him, like they have them all line up, walks over to him, and he pretends to do his like I read thing instead of just saying like I saw the fucking panties. Like he still tries to pretend that he has this like fucking goofy superpower in that moment.
Well, that's what ties him to that one specifically, where I was talking about each one like reflects the one, because that's the one where he can be like, I got him, like otherwise he would have escaped. And that's like his catch. Like, give me like this catch, give me this win, like I got him or whatever.
Yeah, I love that whole chase scene. It's super good.
It's good. Yeah, a lot of the crime scenes, like I said, the one with the rain, I love the utilization of the fucking song is great. Even incorporating an old retro song like that is like so rich. Like, he's touching on so many things that people wouldn't think, like, why would people want to hear this old Korean song? Like, I love that he makes all the choices that typically people would avoid. Oh, people don't know old Korean songs, it's not going to be like, he makes all these choices that work so well. But yeah, that scene, and it does, as a viewer, it does give you the suspicion. Like, it kind of, even though the cops are corrupt as shit, it puts you in that space of like, yeah, why is this fucking guy jerking off in the woods at the murder scene? That's super suspicious. Or
how else does one masturbate? Though, really?
What other options has he?
Right?
No, like that
the
scene
air
was
is fresh out in the woods. I love that was his
Perfect for cranking one
excuse.
out.
He was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Refreshing.
air's fresh out there.
Fresh air makes the cranking good. No, like I really love that scene because, and it's specifically because both like factions of detectives show up for their own purposes. I love that fucking Park shows up there with his shaman thing or
Yeah.
whatever, like whatever he's like, you know how much this costs? It's real. Like he's again, like he was skeptical when we saw him last. Heart smash cut to him doing this fucking little seance thing that he is desperately trying to convince this other detective is legitimate because he paid a lot for it.
Yeah.
And then the other guy shows up because he's doing like his fucking Willem Dafoe and Boondock Saints thing, trying to like feel out what the situation
I love how
is,
they're
the
I love how
logic,
they're
and,
like admiring him too. They're like, oh, he does look cool though. He's like smoking a cigarette. And shit.
yeah. And then they both hide, and then they all just like between the three of them, they basically have somebody that is like by far the best suspect they've had so far just present himself to them by
Mhm.
happenstance, and they still can't make shit out of it for like the longest time. They have to haul ass catching him. I don't know. It's just such a great scene. It's a lot of great tension in that scene that's also like feeds into the comedy of the detectives bumbling bullshit. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I dig it. It's
Yeah.
also very, very fucking dark though, when you like obviously looking at what the guy's doing, but like from the perspective of these cops and like how like, oh my god, how vapid and stupid those two of them are, and then you find out that the other guy's not much better as time goes on. He's just like
Mhm.
better at concealing his biases, I guess, or whatever. Like he's more heads. I don't know. Everybody's so fucking headstrong and sure of themselves that they fuck up consistently all the time, even when they're all on the same page. Like this is our guy. All sides see this happening. By happenstance, we found this guy. We got to catch him. And then they almost fuck that up royally, and then eventually do fuck it up horribly. So I don't know. It's very good.
Mhm.
Yeah. We should probably land the plane. Are there any other major things you guys want to touch on though? I feel like there's still a lot here we could mine, but
Yeah, that's the thing. There are a lot. But yeah, I don't think it's possible to cover everything.
you're right. Okay. I still have a little bit of trivia too. We can get
Okay.
into in a minute, but all right, let's go and rate this thing out of 5. Rand Deasy, why don't you kick us off? How do you feel about
Oh, shit.
Memories of Murder?
I feel pretty good about it. Like some of that context really like brought home a lot of the stuff that I was like just unsure about because I wasn't sure what the the cultural relevance of some of this stuff is just lost on me. This movie is very accessible even with those constraints, but like it adds a flavor that I wasn't sure how it worked in, if that makes sense. So as an outsider in that way, like I really, really fucking enjoy this movie, and I think I've grown to enjoy it more based on some of that context, like some of the political background or whatever. It reminds me of like Chinatown is the backdrop of like the LA water crisis in the fucking 40s or whatever. Like all of these things, they happen correspond. These really great like drama stories, crime stories happening against a backdrop of real historical unrest or crisis or whatever. I think those like it really adds a level of like I don't know, like claustrophobia to this investigation, in that like they can't get the men they want, they can't get the resources they want, they don't have the technology, they have to outsource it, all this stuff that they have as hindrance, in large part because of the way the country is run and stuff that is like much bigger than the people here. It really like shows just how like even as big of a deal as this is, this like big serial killer or whatever, it's an insular thing. And I really like that about it. I'm getting off on one thing here, but like I really like the way this movie looks. I really love so much of it corresponds with what I understand to be like the power dynamics of policing and the power dynamics of like an oppressive government or whatever. I can recognize a lot of these things and what is being criticized very easily, even though I don't speak the language and I don't know a lot of these specifics of what's going on around there. And that really added to the stew for me a lot. So I don't know. I don't want to keep spinning my wheels too long here. Half a bottle soju deep, and I could just keep going. So I'm gonna call it a 4.5. I think this is a damn good movie. I don't have like any one thing that I would point out and be like, that's a flaw. Unless like the biggest thing that I can think of is like I wouldn't necessarily, but you could criticize this movie for taking such a dark, true story and basing a lot of like very silly gags around it or whatever. But I think that levity is very helpful, and this isn't far from the only movie that manages to strike that balance. So I can't give it that ding myself. I'm gonna give it a 4.5. I feel like maybe in a few years I'll do a third watch and see if it bumps up to 5 or if it stays put. Yeah, 4.5.
All right, 4.5 from Randy. Juice. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great film, and it's nice to be able to watch it even like recently and just be able to kind of like know it's a great film, but then to go in and see why, for something to kind of like live up to the hype in a lot of ways. And this second watch even like made me appreciate it more when you have to hyper analyze everything. But I really actually was even more kind of like what Randy was saying, like on a second watch, I was just really impressed because it felt like every element was like so essential and so important and hit in like different ways. Um, the opening scene of the kid mimicking the cop, which just like reflects the cop as being this child or whatever, was great. And then to kind of like wrap it up in the end with this girl maybe knowing who the killer was, and she's like, oh, he's just an ordinary man, and like staring into the camera, like just like very impactful stuff. There's it's funny to compare this to Fincher, but to know that we covered just last year we covered Seven, and to know that there's like 0% levity in that, and to have this film which is like very kind of in a similar way, but that has a lot of levity to it, just to see like how that's presented. It definitely, of course, I think I gave 7 a 5, but it's nice to be able to have that and have it feel accomplished, not have it feel forced or feel awkward in some ways. So I do really appreciate that. Touching on just the misogyny of it, like I feel like everything is such a potent critique, but I also feel like he's just not hammering on everyone, or like it's like he's like presenting it as it was in all its dirty concepts, but at the same time it's like, there's this misogyny. They don't listen to the women. Are the women always right? Not necessarily. Like we said, the one woman tells them to go to the shaman, but to even include those elements, it's real. That like really happens. And whether it's right or wrong, it's like, that's part of the cultural relevance. It's how people think about things. It's how they went about doing things and still do to this day. And so I love seeing like the old restaurants where they're eating the samgyeopsal and like drinking the soju, watching the news. It's like very rich. Some of the cinematography, like I said, I love that scene in the rain. The chase scene is very tense. The music that kicks in, the song choice of like the gloomy letter, it's all just like it's neo noir, but it's like in this small rural town, and it's I don't know. I think it's constructed very, very well. The singing room, the karaoke scene, it's all just like hits so hard. It's like so relevant. It's so real, and like I don't know. I think he did a really good job. There, I could go on and on about this movie. There's a lot of things we didn't talk. The church crowd protesting, that's still some shit that happens this day. The peaches like in her vagina, like some of these elements and stuff.
Shit.
The brutality, like that's the thing, is like we have these things. It's interesting. Sometimes it's funny. The emotional weight at the end, especially too, this young girl, to end it with this young girl and this guy being so desperate to fucking stop this and to catch it, and then ultimately just fucking giving up, and to know at this point this film made that nobody's been caught, there's no justice, it's got like, it just has a lot of emotional weight too. So I'm gonna give this a 5. This is a 5-star film. This is like a Korean staple. This is maybe one of the best Korean films ever made, and it really does hit. Like each element really is like so relevant and important and hits perfectly, I think. So yeah, I really appreciated it the second time around. It's a good film.
That's interesting, man. Like, I don't know. I think that like the way you just described it again reminds me of The Wire, where it's like it's not over. It doesn't have to like it does over dramatize to some extent, but like it doesn't have to do much over dramatization because the truth is already like if you put all of those pieces, the misogyny, the political unrest, all that stuff, you put it all together, it forms the story. Like the story tells itself at that point, because it's basically like setting up like all the barriers on a pinball machine, where you can sort of like see how it's going to bounce off things necessarily. Pinball's a bad example.
Well, and
'cause
even
that's
the
famously
villains
pretty
have their
good.
perspective. Like the one, it's like they're people. That's kind of the idea of the
Yeah.
Wire. It's like you see from Stringer Bell, you see from
Yeah.
Omar. They're murdering people. They're doing these things. So you like understand why or how they got there, and that's the journey.
Like
yeah,
the
it's-
messiness of humanity is
Yeah.
at play here, and it's like what makes these crimes possible for people to get away with crimes like this,
Yeah.
because people are so wrapped up in their own fucking messy lives and the ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't
Bob.
mean to cut in the middle of Bob's thing there.
Oh, hey.
Bob, out of 5, how do you feel about Memories of Murder?
Pretty similarly. So we were talking a lot about Fincher and like comparing his style to this movie, and something that definitely stood out to me is like this movie felt very reserved in comparison to a lot of Fincher's work, and just generally in comparison to a lot of like other true crime stuff or stuff that was inspired by true crime, like True Detective, things like that, which definitely stood out in my mind too, because like the backwoods of Louisiana kind of has a small town feel. It's similar to this movie, but this has kind of like this more reserved take on that, which I appreciated, but like maybe made this movie not stick out quite as much to me at first. But then in hearing like all the context and how Korea went from like basically no film industry whatsoever, and then less than 10 years later, you've got this movie that's definitely pushing the envelope in ways that we may not be aware of as American viewers. And that just, I think the context of this movie truly does add quite a lot of value in that aspect. And also, the first time I watched this, I didn't know any of the history. I didn't know this was based on anything true. I didn't like the ending, him breaking the fourth wall and just looking at the camera. I really didn't like it. But knowing the context, it completely transforms the ending for me and makes it like really hold a lot of weight, knowing that at the time this was released, the killer was not catched, wasn't caught. And like the dude is basically looking at potentially the killer should he be watching this movie. It's just like, I don't know, it makes your skin crawl in that way. Whereas the first time I watched it, it felt kind of cheesy. So, yeah, I really like knowing the context and the historical value of this movie quite a bit. Outside of that, technically speaking, this movie is beautiful. It's like the color palette almost has this like painterly kind of vibe to it. I like it better than Fincher's stuff. Honestly, I think it looks better. The performances are fantastic. I really appreciate the comedy that's woven throughout this movie. I think it really hits for me. And I also like kind of appreciate that they don't show you a bunch of like gruesome murder scenes. It's just like left up to you. The thing that they really focus on is really the horror of like these torture sequences, the things that the police are doing to these suspects. That's like really kind of what they focus, maybe not more on, but at least the same amount, I guess.
Equal, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I like all of that. This movie is definitely worth watching, and I think it warrants multiple viewings. Actually, I got a lot of enjoyment out of it at the same time, specifically like the movie research for sure. I'm going to come in with a 4.5.
What did you just say, Bob? The last thing you just said.
You cut out a little.
I got a lot of enjoyment. Something.
Oh, out of watching this for the second time and then doing a little bit of research afterwards.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
So yeah. I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5, and that's going to put our aggregate at a 4.7. Let's go ahead and jump into our Rotten Tomatoes segment and see what the critics and users think about Memories of Murder.
All right, folks, this is the Rotten Tomatoes segment. I'm going to have these two gentlemen guess within the best of their abilities what the aggregate positive score is on RottenTomatoes.com. Out of 80 reviews to start, we're going to start with our critics, and there are 80 of those. Out of those 80, I'm going to start with Bob today. What do you think the percentage of those 80 reviews would you say are positive reviews?
I gotta think this is pretty dang high. It seems to be very well received, obviously in Korea, but also in America. It's got a nice Criterion release with Del Toro going on about it and stuff. So
It's a great release.
it's my favorite release. I'm gonna go. How high should I go? I'll take a 90, please.
90. Is my microphone fucked up?
No?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. I just bumped it, so I'm
No.
just making sure.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, 90% for Bob. That's a fair guess. Justin, rather, where are you going to come in on this? Over, under?
Think it's gonna be high. It's Korean, Bong Joon-ho, and Criterion release, and like another thing too. It's fun to have a master of of a craft admire something else. Like hearing Del Toro talk
Yeah.
about and the reason why he admires it was really fun to watch. It's not very long. I think it's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's like 3.5 minutes, but yeah, I think this is highly respected film across the board, especially for critics. So how could we tie at 94, 93? That would give us no.
What the hell are you saying?
I want to go higher than Bob, but I want to give
Okay.
a potential for a tie. So
Okay. All right.
I was saying, like, would a 93 get us a tie? I don't think so.
94.
90.
Go with 94, yeah.
All right, then I'm going with 94.
Because then if it's 92, we could tie.
Okay. All right, good call. All right, 94.
All right. 94. I'm
That's
so glad.
teamwork,
that we-
baby.
I like those
Yes.
potentials for ties.
There you go. Well, I'm sorry to say that there will be no tie. There is a distinctive winner here, and he's only 1 percentage point away from the correct answer, which is 95%. Justin's going to take this.
Whoa!
Very, very close.
Nice.
Oh man,
Nice.
yeah, that's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I always joke about like, oh, that Korean's gonna push it up a scotch, but I mean, I think this is just a really
Personally, I
highly
always joke about the
respected film.
hell ski.
Randy, you representing Bob over there? How dare you? How dare you
I don't
choose
care.
sides?
Randy has no idea what he's doing.
Never have. That's my secret.
It's
not that much of a secret. All right, let's go. Let's jump over to our audience score. There are 10,000 plus audience ratings for this film, so no shortage there. We'll start with Justin this time and give it a reverse. Out of those 10,000, what percentage do you think are positive reviews?
I do think it's gonna be lower just because 95 is so high, but I mean, I think it's still gonna be high. So considering that, I definitely got to give the hell yeet. I got to get my hell yeet
There
over
we go.
here.
There you go.
Speak
I
English, Doc. We ain't scientists.
think I'll
Let's
I
go.
think I'll take Bob's 90.
Snake in the 90.
Taking it.
Bob,
Fuck.
how about you? You want to snake the 94?
It's gotta be high. God in heaven.
God.
I think it's gonna be pretty comparable, actually. I don't see it falling much lower. Probably a bit lower, but not much. So it's a 95 for the critics. I'll do a 92.
92. All right.
We can
Well,
tie.
holy hot good goddamn. There is no tie, but there is a ring-a-dingy on this
Oh, my
motherfucker.
lord.
But he's dead on. All right. Jumped up Jesus Palomina. This one here is actually going to be a 92%.
Oh,
Bob's going to walk away with the gold.
Whoa! Oh, that's a hell's key.
She was gorgeous.
No,
Okay.
92. Yeah, gorgeous.
Nicely done. Well
Nice.
done, guys. Very much in the right realm all the way through. Let's see. The critics' consensus reads as follows: Memories of Murder blends the familiar crime genre with social satire and comedy, capturing the all too human desperation of its key characters. That's plenty fair to me, I think.
And that's
Yeah,
right where we fell too. Our overall was a 94%. So we're right there with everyone. Critics and boozers alike.
I'm giving it a 1. Rob, change it. I hate it.
I had to read one.
If you spoke
All
Korean,
right.
you wouldn't have to.
Learn another language, ass.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.
Oh, Randy. Oh my
Oh.
god.
I know.
Oh
Try
my
not
god.
try to keep it in your pants as I speak
Hell
Korean in your sweet ear hole.
skeet.
Yes. Let's read some negative reviews and see what these idiots
Yes.
think. All right, here's one. For a film about women getting brutally attacked and dispatched, the movie has no sense of urgency or underlying dread.
What? They're torturing people in this.
Also, I thought like several scenes were very dreadful.
Yeah. I mean, and urgent. There's a pretty prolonged
Yeah.
chase scene for one thing, and quite a few terrified women in this film. And I don't know. I feel like the dread is pretty thick myself.
Yeah, the scene when he's hiding in the tree and we've got the nurse
The
lady
split,
and then the
yeah.
schoolgirl. Yeah, and they do the swap. Dude, that scene's incredible. It's great.
Yeah, it is.
Here's another one. The script is as sloppy as Song Kang-ho's unkempt cop, sprinkled with intriguing ideas and imaginative details like the investigation simply get lost in blind alleys. That's I don't know what
I
he's
am
fucking saying here.
lost in that review.
The script is as sloppy as the unkempt cop, sprinkled with intriguing ideas and imaginative details like that, like the investigation, like details that, like the investigation, simply get lost in blind alleys. So he's saying the
Okay.
intriguing ideas get lost.
Gotcha.
No. Next.
No.
No.
Last one. This one's my favorite. Uneven movie has tonal problems.
Damn.
You couldn't have read that more perfectly. Thank you, Randy.
Uneven sentence has period problem.
Well, we talked. So another relevant thing too is this came out 2003. This and Old Boy came out in the same fucking year. Like this is
Hell
the
damn,
fucking
dude.
year, dude.
Korea dropped that fucking dick on the table, son.
Yeah. Well, and also
It was
too,
as big as the country itself.
every time, you know, we always talk about this genre blend and, you know, oh, tonal problems. How can there be comedy in such a bleak film? But I mean, these films coming out at that time, you know, we talked about it with Old Boy too, is like so essential to any Korean films that we've covered or talked about since then. I mean, that's very essential to be able to kind of like open that door and set that stage for these kind of like blends. So yeah,
The
very
blend is very important. Like, I don't know, like it's of course quite possible to make a movie that is as bleak from top to bottom as it can possibly be. Seven is a great example of that. But blending, like, part of what makes portions of a story so impactful are bits of contrast. So like that's why you have fucking comedy insert characters into movies that are not comedic. That's why you
Yeah.
have those things, is because you know, if you speak loudly the entire movie, you're really only getting one tonality. If
Mhm.
you speak loudly and then softly, or if you speak
Ooh.
somberly and then comedically, like you're giving contrasts that give the movie shape. So
My
I
boy
think this movie has a lot of
Dynamic
shape.
Randy over here.
Whoa.
Look at you. You ever had a chocolate
Contrast.
I'm
chip
just a
cookie?
Jesus-loving ex-Marine.
You ever had a chocolate chip cookie with a little bit of sea salt on top? Blow your dick off.
Heresy.
Little salty, little sweet.
How dare you combine
Okay.
flavors?
See, it's just like a Korean film.
Sea salt cook, the best American description I've heard. You ever had this cookie with a little bit of salt on top? That's
Oh,
what
yeah.
I'm talking
Nothing.
about.
I love the flavor of salt blended on my cookie. The very specific and unique flavor of salt.
Salt.
I like my cookies like I like my Korean cinema with salt.
Salty.
Glazed and
That's
salty.
blending flavors right there.
The flavor of
I'm a
salt.
citizen of the world.
We headed to Flavor Town, boys. Salt.
I'm starting a fusion restaurant where we fuse everything with the flavor of salt.
This bipping
Alright.
bop needs a little bit of salt.
Y'all
this
got
here
me.
Bippins Bops.
Y'all got any coarse salt back there? Some finishing salt.
God.
All right, let's move on. We're
yeah,
not
I think-
finishing this at all.
I think we got there. Yeah, I got a little bit of trivia left. Let's go ahead and get into it.
It's totally time for trivia.
Trivia. I need to scroll. God, it's fucking hell. All right. Yeah, I got a few more points here we can get into real quick. So this apparently there in 1996 there was a play also based on this true crime story called "Come to See Me" by Kim Kwang Rim, and it embellished on the story for sure. Similarly, the movie embellished on the story, but I guess Bong Joon-ho did see the play and I guess took elements from it in some way.
Okay.
So there's a play out there. Have you seen that, Jude?
Nah.
It exists.
Huh.
Check it out. There's one deleted scene from this movie that shows Detective Cho walking in a red light district and then getting a massage from a girl. He asks her about possible leads regarding the murders. The scene was shot in a real red light district in the city of Jeongju and featured real sex workers. They had to ask a local pimp for permission to shoot there.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's what.
Well, that just shows
sounds
another
like business to me.
well, it shows like another element of like he wanted to incorporate like getting the leads,
Yeah.
from women and stuff like that. Like that was prominent.
true.
Yeah.
That's cool. I did not look on my disc to see if that was included. I should have. I assume it is if it's just a cut scene, but
Yeah.
that's cool though, man. Bong Joon-ho stated that the script for Memories of Murder was directly influenced by Alan Moore in Eddie Campbell's comic book From Hell, and that was also that he was also a bit disappointed with the Hughes brothers' film version of From Hell, which I think a lot of people were. That movie's not great.
No.
But that's interesting to
A
hear.
lot of
Though.
opium in that movie.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I can see some correlations between that and this. Yeah, I don't know. I've never read the book, but the
I haven't
movies-
either. It's on my
Yeah.
shelf. It's my I have much like Bob's Blue collection. There's a lot of untapped material on my
What?
shelf. It's just book form because I'm illiterate, as we know.
Hey, keep my blues out your mouth, Randy.
Damn.
Oh wow. Ooh.
Director Bong Joon-ho was confident that the killer would watch the film. Thus, in the final shot, Park Doo-man looks directly in the camera, assuming that he would be face to face at some point with the actual killer. I saw some blurb saying that he did actually watch this movie. I don't know how true that is. Though.
Well, if he was, so I don't know if we mentioned this or not. So the killer that ultimately was caught and admitted to the murders was already in prison. So we talked about him killing his sister-in-law. That was in 1994.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So by the time this film is, so it's
So
not,
we
it's not,
watch it in jail.
well,
Like,
it's
I don't think-
maybe, but it's not
Yeah.
great. But if we consider that a lot of these murders took place around the 80s, he was in jail by 94 and is still there. I think he's still alive. And at least when they did the DNA test, that was 2019, 2020. I think he admitted to the murders. And when the other guy finally got released. So at least there's some kind of justice, I guess. Except I did read, though, that by the time they actually proved it, the statute of limitations was already passed. So he wasn't actually ever charged with these crimes, but the cases were able to be closed in that sense.
Well, at least
I guess.
he's like, at least he's not a free man.
No,
Yeah.
he's not a free
Yeah.
man.
Guy,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
He is in
That's-
fucking jail.
And he has been since
Good.
94. So that's something.
It could be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
yeah.
The last bit that I have here, I was really interested in this reoccurring thing that they were talking about in the movie about how the killer like came up from the outhouse, like he was like living beneath the outhouse somehow, and it sounded like an interesting piece of folklore, and it reminded me of Sean from Dark Side of Soul. We went when we visited
Yeah.
Juice in Korea. We went on one of his tours and he found out a lot of really interesting information about Korean folklore and stuff. And I pulled up this toilet goddess that he mentions on.
He does.
On
Yeah,
our
has a little
tour.
segment about that. Yeah.
And Man, I'm gonna try.
I
and say this
got
name
it.
correctly.
I got it,
You
Bob.
know it. Okay.
Yep. And it's actually got I got the Korean to it. It's the goddess or whatever it's called, a Chukshin.
Okay.
Chukshin.
Chukshin. So this is the toilet goddess, and if anybody entered the outhouse without coughing 3 times, Chukshin was believed to use her long hair to attack the intruder. And as soon as the hair touched your skin, you grew sick and died.
Hmm.
And I can't remember if Sean said it's 3 coughs. Could you also do like 3 knocks, or was it always just coughs?
Yeah, he tells a little funny story. I don't want to like knock it because like it's part of his like tour, or
Oh,
not
okay,
not
yeah.
not knock it, but I mean he
Rip it.
yeah
Spoiler
rip it, but he
warning.
does so Sean is his wife is Korean, and so he talks about how his father-in-law, who's much older now, still does it, but he does it 2 times, and he asks him like, why do you do it 2 instead of 3? And he's like, well, I'm old enough now, if the Chukshin wants to take me, then she can take me or whatever. But
I'm
still
old. My plumbing don't work so good no more.
he said he still actually is like has the habit of like clearing his throat before
Mhm.
going to the bathroom or whatever. So
That's
yeah.
awesome, man.
That's so wild, yeah.
If I were just like, some asshole in Korea from America, and somebody like, before they went in the
Yeah.
bath, I'd have no idea. Like, no, just clearing the throat or whatever. That's
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
I love knowing that stuff. That's super interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of cool folklore in Korea. Check it out.
Well, and we
especially Korea.
so
Uh,
also too, just him going to the fortune teller, like that's still very prevalent in Korea as well. So I mentioned it, and like the talismans and like the little sheet that he did. People go to fortune tellers like these days still to like get names for their babies, to find out an auspicious day to get married, to move sometime, like an auspicious. Some people, like, it's a lot more common for people to actually like change their names in Korea, like their full name. I've
Hmm.
had several students who've like legally changed their name because they felt their name was like too old fashioned, and they'll go to like fortune tellers to find out like what's a good lucky name for me or something. So that kind of stuff is still very like talking about folklore, but I mean like that stuff like that is still very prevalent within society, like normal working people and stuff. Like, I'm gonna go change my name, go to the fortune teller.
That's
I'm gonna go
awesome.
play the wheel of names and just
Yeah.
spin it around, see what comes up.
One of
Randy,
my-
you've got about 30 or 40 to choose from.
I know that's a low ball estimate.
Banana Man.
One of my friends
Oh
was
my
like
God.
training to be a tattoo artist, and she was like, she was trying to pick her like tattoo artist name, like stage name, essentially. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, what are you gonna pick? She's like, I'm just gonna go to a fortune teller.
Nice.
That's
Like,
pretty
all
rad.
right, yeah. So
Nice.
that shit happens all the time.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely shouts out to Dark Side of Soul. If you are in Korea,
Yeah.
definitely go on one of their walks. If you're not in Korea, check out their podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah, I was
It
trying to get
is.
Sean on for this episode, but it was a tight squeeze on the schedule, so unfortunately he couldn't join us this week. But yeah, we'll try to get him on soon.
Yeah.
We'll know he's coming because he will cough 3 times before entering the Zoom meeting.
And
I'm sure I'll be
if you
checking
wanna-
out this episode regardless, though.
If you want to hear Sean on our podcast, he was on the episode where he talked about A Tale of Two Sisters and had
That's
some
right.
really good insights on that one. So check that out too. But that's all I got for trivia. Let's go ahead and talk about our cooter of the week.
Ooh.
Straight chillin'. Cooter of the week.
Juice, what is a cooter and why do we hunt them?
No, Cooter's character type in a straight challenge exclusive. Cooter has to hit 3 of these 5 points to be considered a cooter, but we want the cooter with the most points. The 5 points of cooterdom are sexual deviance, manipulation, smug arrogance, overall look and attire, and overall patheticness. Boys, I think we probably got some choices.
Yeah, I think probably so.
All the cops.
We've got a lot of smug arrogance.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. The
Pretty much
bravado in this movie
everyone.
is thick. Yeah, I don't think I think that's kind of a given for every male character.
Every
in this,
male,
except
yeah.
except for
Bach,
the young
maybe.
disabled guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe a couple of extras in there somewhere. But our detectives, all 4 of the detectives, the sergeant, they're definitely on that spectrum for
So what do we think? Do
sure.
we think maybe Detective Park is maybe Tuman, the lead, you know, do we think maybe he's the maybe lead cooter?
I think I would go with Cho.
Is that the dude who's kicking everybody?
Yeah.
Detective Cho, yeah.
But
With
they're
his
both
little
up
booty.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we could go with Detective Cho. So yeah, he's definitely smug, arrogant, pathetic, gets his ass
Yes.
whooped. And
He is,
also
like,
he's
top
whooping
tier for
on like
patheticness.
young
Yeah.
women just because
He refuses
Disabled
to get
guys,
his
young
leg
women, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
looked at.
yeah.
well, he and
Yeah.
he gets his ass beat by his own sergeant because he fucks up so royally in that
Yeah.
interrogation. Like, he just cannot. This man cannot help himself but to drop kick a motherfucker. He has to do it.
Flying in.
Like,
So
it's just like he's this very tense moment where he's in the background, and then it's just like he's over the table and he's like in this guy's chest. It's fucking crazy.
pathetic, manipulation, smug arrogance for sure, right off the
Yeah,
rip.
there you
Three
go.
right there.
Pretty
Mhm.
dim for manipulation, but he's doing it for sure.
Yeah, he's trying his
participating.
best.
He's
I
trying,
think.
yeah.
He's not leading the manipulation charge because he's not.
Yeah.
He's not the brain
His-
guy.
His attire and sexual deviance, I don't think hit. I don't think.
I don't
does
think he's
anything
kind of like a little
sexual.
like kind of disrespectful towards his female
Yeah, they talk some
detective.
shit. Yeah.
It's not necessarily sexual deviance, but
Can we-
yeah.
Can we count his little
It's
booty
gross.
cover as as a
His,
an attire
his
thing?
I love how they do this emotional moment where he's like, oh, he's getting his leg cut off, and they like zoom in on like his booty or whatever. It's
Oh my
like
God,
foot
dude.
cover.
Jesus
That
Christ.
shit's so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Well, I think he's.
Yeah, maybe.
I think he's
So
hitting
three-
cooler levels.
He's I think he at least hits 3, maybe 3.5
Yeah.
with
I think
the
Park's
looking at
hitting a lot of
tire.
the
Yeah.
same ones, though.
Probably,
He is. He's
yeah.
definitely more manipulative too.
Yeah.
We could, if
And-
it's not necessarily,
Yeah.
but a little bit of sexual deviance in the way of like he's going to when he goes to the saunas and he's just like checking out everybody's pubes
Baldies.
because he's it's.
Around here, we call them baldies.
I love how they like pitch this idea, and he's like, a monk. There's a temple
It's a
right up the
Buddhist
road.
monk. It's a
I love that they
perfect
kind of give him that
crime.
like
He's
cockeyed
got no
stare when he
pubes.
says that. It's just like complete silence.
I
Oh,
love when the new
fuck.
sergeant comes in and he's just like, oh, I gotta that's something I didn't touch on at all. The first like sergeant who's like, fuck, I'm too old for this shit, and who just tries to
Mhm.
force it on the young disabled guy or whatever. That's such like another thing we didn't touch on, like Korean bureaucracy. That shit still is so prominent. Government officials just getting like shuffled around no matter like where their experience or whatever. It's like I love him coming in though and being like, just like doing his best to deal with this shit.
Jesus. But yeah, Park, like I would say, like
Yeah.
he's pathetic, and it like whereas like what is it? Cho is more pathetic in the way that like he's just unthinking. He's just like all id, just does whatever
Yeah.
impulsive thing comes to him. Park is pathetic in a way where he's like full of bravado that is just barely concealing an absolute core of insecurity that is like
Mhm.
very obvious to anybody probably except for him and people dumber than him. Like he's only able to really fool like Cho, for example, into thinking he knows what the fuck he's talking about. I don't think anybody who hears him give his spiel about having shaman eyes believes him, at least of all the audience. And by
Yeah.
the end of the movie, it's just almost kind of a joke that he's staring at the camera. Like that's how I took it. I didn't think about like looking at the actual killer, but like him looking at the camera, it's just like, yeah, you're stripped away now, motherfucker. Nothing your little shaman eyes ever saw led you to a conclusion that you could
shaman
use
eye.
or do. Like that's bullshit, and you have nothing basically. Like you are not special, as it turns out. You're just
Yeah.
insecure. So I think that's a pretty high patheticness quotient.
Yeah, he hits high on manipulation, smug arrogance, and patheticness for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I give him a little bit of an edge over Cho just because I think he's more devious and
Capable,
thinking
yeah.
about it.
Mhm.
Like I think he makes conscious,
More
conscious
calculated, yeah,
Yeah,
decisions,
he's a
yeah.
calculated person, even in his fucked up calculations.
Yeah.
And then the other, I would say that those are the two that are like most
Prominent.
obvious to pinpoint into that category. But I mean, the killer as a nebulous ID
Whoever it
and
is, yeah.
unknown, like just the sheer basics of it. It's almost like an insult to call him a cooter, though, and not just like a
That dude
rapist
seems
piece
like
of
a
shit,
real
but-
piece of shit too. He
Yeah, like,
so
it's-
later once he got caught. So I guess one kind of good thing. He was like, yeah, I did it. He's like he did an interview with one of the siblings or something. Like they granted one of the brothers of one of the victims to like talk with him. And he's like, why did you do it? He's
Jesus.
like, I just ran into her. Like he's complete sociopath, like unfeeling. But he's like, he never sought parole. He never sought like an appeal or not. He's just like, yeah, I fucking murdered people,
God,
like
that's
straight
gonna be
up,
such
yeah.
Mind hunters.
And a
vibes,
lot,
man.
yeah, a lot of them. So, like, just to
Uh.
kind of talk about, so it really does remind me of Mindhunter when you look at some of this stuff. So, the first victim is attributed to a 71-year-old woman who was just returning home after visiting her daughter, apparently. That was in September of 86. So she was 71 years old. It seems like that was his first like kill. And then after that, it was all specifically targeted 25-year-old woman, 25-year-old woman, 23-year-old woman, 19-year-old woman, 29-year-old woman, like 14-year-old woman, 14-year-old, like it was very like calculated then at that point. So that shit's like, he's a real piece of shit.
Yeah, he would definitely in the movie, obviously in real life,
Yeah.
King fucking Cooter for sure. So yeah,
Yeah,
we can,
it's-
for the
it almost
purposes
seems-
of the movies,
Yeah,
Park the killer.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like it's not kosher to even give it to a real life killer because it's just like
That's-
it's too weighty for the moniker of Cooter. This isn't just a character that we want to see get his comeuppance. This is a piece of shit that doesn't deserve to walk free for the rest of his life for sure.
Yeah,
luckily he's not.
he's
Yep.
not.
That is a good thing.
All right, boys. Well, that was our Cooter of the week.
All right,
Yeah.
we did it.
We
We
did it.
did
We
it.
done it.
I don't think any of us have had a ton of time to watch a whole lot of stuff this week, so let's go ahead and just glaze on it. We'll carry it over another week for what we've been watching.
I'm gonna put a fine glaze on there.
like a Krispy Kreme,
Oh yeah.
but it needs salt.
Put
Damn
some
it.
salt on
A
this
glaze,
Krispy
a little
Kreme.
finishing salt.
Hey,
on
That's
that.
Hey,
fine dining right there, boy.
Oh, I like to see them granules on there.
I like my donuts like I like my Korean cinema salted.
Salt.
We do have one voicemail though. Hey, guy, will you salt Medina? Let's go ahead and jump into our hotline screams.
Hotline scream.
Should we? I think we might have to retire the name of this segment because Drake got demolished. So
I completely forgot this was in any way a reference to anything. Like
I mean,
it's
It's
just
ours
such a-
now. We've claimed
it's-
it.
Yeah, it's just like
People
such a part
associate
of
it
our
with straight
show.
chilling now, not Drake.
yeah, that's
Right.
that's the predominant cultural force at play
That
here.
is that just blew my fucking mind. Yeah, we got one voicemail. It's not from your boy Drake because he's getting his fucking ass roasted. It is from Jack. We got one voicemail from Jack. Let's go and hear what he's got to say.
Look, Jack, I haven't called in a very, very long time, and there's a great reason for it. It's because I used to call into the show all the time when I listened to it back when I worked a job that I had to sit around and listen to podcasts for hours. I don't do that anymore. But I still keep an eye on your show from time to time. I like to check in on the movies that I do care about. And something occurred to me. I was sort of sitting around, I'm like, what is an era of horror that is never really explored, you know? There's a lot of horror movies, especially nowadays, being made about the 80s, even modern day. Bogus, man. I want an idea, an era of horror that you think really could use a good movie. I'm going to go with one. I haven't seen a good medieval horror movie in probably ever. Never. The only one I can think of is Evil Dead 3 there. That's a goofy ass movie. Nobody watches that movie for like the actual horror. It's about Evil Dead 3. I could use a Black Plague movie There's a lot of eras of history, you know. Humans have been going at it a long time. We've been getting scared. And I'm sick and tired of watching movies with 80s fucking bullshit. I need diversity. I need something else. So this is Jack checking in again, asking the question, what's an era of horror that you really want to see a movie set in? Hell, throw one in fucking 2 BC. I want to see young Jesus fighting off zombies. Come on.
Well, that's in the Bible, so I don't know.
That is actually being made. But have you guys seen that headline? So I have listened to this voicemail, and I swear, like the next day, I saw the byline, and I was like, "Holy shit, it's happening!" Nick Cage is going to be in a horror movie about young Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Is
happening.
he gonna be Jesus?
I'm not sure, but he's going to be in it. I hope he is.
Maybe he's
Jesus.
heroic Pontius Pilate. I don't know.
Anything.
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
it's gonna be
Also,
wild.
Black Death.
Yeah, I was about to say there is a plague movie.
Yeah, that's Sean
Yeah.
Bean.
Yeah.
We reviewed it at one point, I think.
We at
Maybe-
least
or
I don't
maybe we
think
just
we
watched it
did. I think
together.
we all
We
watched
watched
it
it,
together. Yeah.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
it was then. But
Worth checking out.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It is.
And
yeah.
also, if you want like
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons we liked Prey so much was because of its
Yeah.
time period and its setting
Yeah.
being pretty unique. So yeah, what are other eras? I don't know. What do you have one, Justin? You were about to launch.
Well,
into
we were.
something.
I think maybe in Prey we did this whole little thing of like, what if they did another Predator movie? Where would you want it set or where? But I think one thing it's interesting to tie in like time and place in a kind of way, because one thing that we I don't know, I've talked about this a little before, maybe on that episode, but the idea of a kind of like pirate themed setting
holy
in
shit.
the around the Caribbean with some type of like maybe voodoo rituals tied in or something like that, you know, like I feel like that's very underrepresented.
Okay, yeah, that's a little different than what I was thinking. I immediately thought of like The Terror, which is like I don't know, like what is that, 1800s, like or 1700s, like circumnavigation,
Yeah, they're
you know, sail
they're-
ships basically.
Yeah.
building
Right?
maps of the world.
Yeah,
Right, they're
yeah.
cartographers and shit,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of thing. Like, and I haven't watched that, but more than an episode. But I was very intrigued by that setting. I really would like to see like a Master and Commander style like setting, but with something going on. I mean, last Voyage of the Demeter was kind of in that world, but it
Yeah.
didn't land for me. So it's not. It didn't quite
Nautical,
quench my thirst.
anything like nautical, you can
Yeah,
even
the
some sea
nautical stuff
monster
for
or
sure.
something, yeah, too. even.
Sure. I was thinking like just like isolation, people going crazy like that.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of that stuff going on in The Terror, it seemed like. So, and like Oberdin, I guess, is that game that I've mentioned many times, has kind of got a little of that.
Yeah.
What else? I don't
I
know.
still
Like
want like a solid, like legitimate gangster horror movie. You could, if you wanted to make it a period piece, you could set it in like the 20s during Prohibition, and like
Yeah.
people are, you know, brewing whiskey and brewing whiskey, distilling whiskey and shit. Some sort of like ghost gangster comes back. I don't know. Something.
Ghost
There's-
Gangsters.
Come see Ghost Gangsters this summer.
Ghostbusters 2 has it.
Oh my lord.
Uh,
And then yeah, even like touching on that, like I think since you mentioned like Prohibition, but I like a Jack the Ripper. I mean, you could do like a, you know,
Yeah.
Gaslight London, you
Well,
know.
From Hell
Clifford.
tried to do that. I don't know if they were super successful.
Yeah, or like I guess thinking like Penny Dreadful kind of touches on a lot of that.
Yeah.
so,
God, it's so good.
God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So good.
I have to do a rewatch this year.
I don't know, maybe like something like I think The Nightingale was kind of this, but like early settled Australia, where it's like, you know, the penal colony of the colonies, you know, maybe something like that could go on, where like they interact with the, you know, with the Aboriginals or whatever, and just try and like,
Yeah.
maybe there's just some sort of like, not just tension, but there's something like supernatural in the mix that mixes them up and causes havoc. Something like
Yeah.
that could work.
Yeah. Maybe you could do like an Alien. Well, this is like kind of, but like I don't know, with all this news of like you know, spacecrafts being spotted in the air by like pilots and somewhat reliable sources. Like you could any war really. World War II comes to mind obviously because it's the first one that usually comes to mind. Just like have these World War II pilots flying through there and see like alien spacecrafts and like have I don't know somebody get abducted or like have a dogfight between these old planes and like alien spacecrafts or I don't know. You could do something crazy like that. It would be pretty interesting.
Independence Day.
Yeah, but
They have the dog
Peri-
fights anyway. But
period piece.
Yeah.
right. A good period
That's a
piece,
good
man. That's tough
question,
to
though.
beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there are examples for like just about anything you can think of, but like the quality and the amount varies
Yeah.
wildly. like
Definitely have to have a
immediately
bigger
like
budget and more planning
Yeah.
goes into that. Accents and
Mhm.
I would love to see like Casablanca, but horror. Like like it's set
Yeah.
in like war torn Africa during one of the world wars. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Where there's like all kinds of people bustling in and out, like that sort of setting, that sort of like Indiana Jones setting, but
Yeah.
like Rit horror. I could do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Lots of options.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's kind of like, and you could just keep throwing out ideas, honestly. But yeah, let's open that question up to the listeners at large. What sort of like period piece horror would you like to see that you haven't seen, or maybe you haven't seen enough of? Call in and let us know at 904-638-3231. Yeah, thanks for hitting us up, Jack. It's been a while, dude.
Yeah.
Don't be a
Yeah.
stranger. We're still here.
I know. Make
I
some
love
more
it's like
time
I
for
check in on you
us.
guys sometimes.
Right?
Like,
Right?
it's like,
Damn.
man, that's more than I do still.
We used to be the hot girl at the prom. Now we're just
Now we're that meme of the guy
Now-
looking around at the other girl.
a booty call.
Yeah, you guys know that meme, right?
I
What?
do know the meme. I'm upset that I know exactly
is-
the meme you're talking about.
I think Yeah.
Mimi? Is that what you're talking
Me-
about? I think
Hey.
it's pronounced
man.
me.
Hey now.
I think your name's Browbra. Yeah.
Oh,
thanks for
Call me
calling in,
meme.
Jack. All right. Hey. That's gonna do it for us this week. It's Straight Chilling. We'll be back next week with a brand new show, as always. And we're going to be talking about a new release, actually. I saw the TV Glow.
The TV
Ooh.
is glowing, I think is the name.
Come sit around the warming glow.
The TV glows.
The TV gloweth over. Check it out in a theater near you. Yeah, this got a limited release last week, I think, and then this coming Friday, I believe it's getting a wide theatrical release. So check it out. This is
Wide release.
make it wide. A24 joint, same director as We're All Going to the World's Fair. I am blanking on the director's name. I'm sorry. But check it out.
Schönbrunn. Jane
Schönbrunn. Jane Schönbrunn. Yeah, thank you, Randy. Definitely worth watching. Check it out in a theater near you. Get ready for next week's show. Until then, you can find us on social media everywhere. Just search Straight Chilling Podcast. If you want to join our daily Slack channel conversations, hit us up on social media. Say, hey, let me in your Slack, brother, and then I'll send you a link so you can do so.
Brother.
Until next week, yeah, make sure to say brother, or else I won't send it. That's the key. Until next week, as always, all you mother truckers, please keep chilling.
All right.
Nice. Good idea.